So, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Those of you who are joining on YouTube, I hope you can hear my voice. So, I was just explaining to our Twitter followers that have been with us already a few minutes that I'm trying to run this now on three kind of mediums or three platforms. One is obviously the Twitter, which is live now on Twitter, has been for the last 5 minutes or so. One is obviously on our YouTube channel, which we are catching now, those of you on YouTube. And the third one is obviously I'm running this course for some students, level 2 students, on the fiqh of halal food and products. So that was the real motivation. And because I was going to dedicate a few hours to this, I just felt it would be worthwhile that others share in and get access to what I'm going to be discussing. So there will be obviously some delays because the course with Al-Balagh was due to start at 2:30, but they did say maybe a few minutes later than that. So please be patient. And as soon as and there may be some kind of administrative conversations that I have with the admin on there where they're telling me to do X, Y, or Z. So be patient. As I've been saying to the people on Twitter, is that what I will be going through is this paper on which is called Stunning of Poultry, and it's the Sharia perspective on multiple bird water bath stunning of poultry. And this paper was available online. It may still be, but we're currently revamping our website. The website that I'm referring to is www.irtis, which is irtis.org.uk. So you should be able to find that on there. If for whatever reason you don't find that on there, then you should be able to find it on the Telegram channel. So if you have Telegram app, which is available both on desktop, PC, laptop rather, and also on iPad and phone, is you go onto the Telegram channel, and on the Telegram channel you will find that this paper is available. So my working which will be is this 6-7 month worth of research that I did, and I will be presenting that. So in the meantime, whilst we're waiting for people here, if you could find that, then inshallah that would be very useful. So you will find, as I'm speaking to you, that every now and then I will engage here. They have a platform on here. So I've got sort of three systems here. I've got an iPad right at the back, which is running the Twitter off, and then there's an iPad, a laptop here, which is doing the YouTube, and then I've got a laptop down here, which is doing the student recording. So there will be questions which will come up there. You will also have opportunity to put up questions on the YouTube, and I assume also on Twitter. I have my phone with me anyway, so I will be able to pick up any questions which come up on Twitter. So in the meantime, I'll give you a couple of minutes for those of you who joined on YouTube to see if you can locate this paper online, because it will be useful. So you can make sort of notes with it, maybe make a small hashia, a small sort of footnotes around it, which will help you assist in understanding what I've done. And then we will obviously start in due course, inshallah. Just check if everything is going well on Twitter, and it seems everything is going well. So we've got no problems there. That's good to see. Alhamdulillah. And this will, as I said, continue on there. I'm just going to send the link now from the YouTube recording. I'm just going to check that it's running well and forward that around so people have access to it. Bear with me. For those of you who don't know, we do have a so I've just sent that on to the Oli Foundation Telegram channel. For those of you who aren't, I put lots of material on there. So whether it's fatawa, videos, things of that nature. So it's very useful. Short reminders, things of that nature. So please do find it and join. And then we also have two fatawa groups, which I'm also forwarding this to. And the fatawa groups, one for gents, one for ladies, obviously deal with all sorts of questions. We've had answered about 2,200 questions on one group and about 2,200 questions on another. So they're quite busy groups. Just going to update our Facebook as well. You can't say we're not on any, we're missing on some platforms. Many people complain that ulama are hard to get to, or ulama are inaccessible, or we don't get a chance to speak to ulama. We want guidance, we want religious opinion, religious understanding, and we can't access the ulama. That can't be, that accusation can't be leveled at us, because as I said, we're on virtually every platform that I can think of. I've already mentioned, or we've posted it. We're already putting it through certain videos, but so I'm going to share this now through our Facebook post as well, Facebook page, whatever you want to call it. So it's out there now, inshallah. I've just been informed by the admin that where I'm delivering this course, they're ready to go soon, inshallah. So I'm sure within the next few minutes we'll be good to go. Maybe pen and paper at the ready, so you've got some notes to take. It is quite a technical subject, and therefore it will be quite challenging. So I don't know if people have expertise in the area, but if you don't, I would suggest, as I've already mentioned, that get access to the paper, the research paper that I'm talking about, and also a pen and paper at hand, because there'll be lots of information I'll be going through. This will be running up until about just short of Maghrib. Maghrib's about 5 to 4 here in Bradford. So some around that kind of time, we'll get to about 4 o'clock. And then obviously I will need to break off. What I'm thinking out structure-wise is that it will be sort of running. It will run for. I need to just get the link again, because I'm just putting on to. So what I'm thinking is that it will run for about an hour, which will be more like a lecture, and then it will be sort of question answer near the end, so everybody gets opportunity to ask. Right, great. Sorry for keeping you, because we're just waiting another couple of minutes here, and then we're good to go. Got some of the resources that I went through piled next to me as well, and in order to put this paper together, I had to go through quite numerous documentation. So here's sort of the regulatory body information that I had to go through, and then following on from that, the European Commission has issued numerous documents which are of benefit, this one in particular. And then obviously, because it's an academic piece, and then there's numerous papers, some that I obviously decided to kill some trees with and printed them, and others so these were quite important papers, and others which I felt, as long as I had access to them as a PDF or access to them as a web page, then I felt that would suffice. So there's lots of material that you need to go through. The research process is quite technical. Those who consider it to be a simple process, unfortunately, don't understand the process and hence simplify it. Research process is very technical. They're asking me, shall we begin? And I'm going to say yes, because you've been keeping long enough. Okay, so we're due to begin shortly, inshallah. Because what they do is they kind of have it set up on here, and then the recording is made as well, but you'll have your own recording on there. So as I was saying, the research process is a technical process, And as a result, we need to do our work properly and thoroughly in order to make declarations, especially declarations of this nature. So as soon as we're good to go and I get the nod, I've said to the chat that let's start. So inshallah, I think in the next few minutes we're going to start because we're running out of time then, especially if we're going to finish around Maghrib time. When I was looking at this work whilst we were waiting for them to come in, I was quite shocked and surprised at the amount of chicken and lamb and sheep we eat. Is absolutely phenomenal. For a community our size, we eat a lot of meat. I guess that shows we're a community that's quite larger than life in more ways than one. We're a big community, a community that eats significantly, so we put on lots of weight, which could explain the various illnesses we then get in middle age, be it diabetes or things of that nature. So I'm quite surprised, as I said, when I saw these figures of how much we eat and the insatiable appetite that we have for poultry and for meat, which then goes into the field itself, goes into the manufacturing world, and as a result, what you find is the amount of animals that have to be killed, or the speed that they have to be killed at, is also high. So, okay, I've been asked to start the video, so we're going to be kicking off soon. Okay. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So again, I've welcomed the students at Al Bala Academy. We already have our colleagues, students, followers, call them what you like, from our Twitter and YouTube already with us. And we will make a start promptly because we are close to 2:45, and I won't be able to proceed beyond 4 o'clock because our Maghrib here is just short of 4 o'clock, and then I'm tied up afterwards. I've already mentioned to people that have already been with us that it's useful if you can get access to this paper. This paper is online. We'll try to maybe put a PDF. If not, I will send a PDF to the admin, and then the admin will forward it to you. I'm speaking in particular to the Al Bala students here. Or I will try to put it somewhere on our Telegram channel. We do have a Telegram channel, for those of you who aren't aware. If you search the Olive Foundation Telegram channel, you will find it. So I was already mentioning, whilst we were waiting for everybody to join, of the insatiable appetite Muslims have for consuming chicken and meat. The halal food industry is a huge industry, and this industry sort of is what you would call disproportionate in the sense that the number of the population of Muslims and the quantity of meat they eat doesn't really add up. It's ridiculously high. And when you have such high demands, then obviously this pushes onto the market, the supply chain. And when the supply chain is being pushed to produce high quantities of poultry, halal poultry, and high quantities of lamb, halal lamb, then obviously it needs quick methods in order to achieve that. And that's where stunning comes in. So today what I'm going to talk to you about for the next hour or so is the stunning of poultry, the Sharia perspective on multiple bird water bath stunning of poultry. Now, the structure I'm hoping to have is maybe, realizing we started a little bit late, is try to reduce my talking to about 45, 50 minutes if I can, and then maybe open up to sort of questions and answers. and then we can go through questions and answers. So whenever we hear the word halal, now become synonymous with food, even though halal and haram is just meaning legal and illegal. But it's just another term really that's used for food that we can eat and food that we can't eat. Now we all know the methodology of how an animal should be slaughtered, and we see that the way an animal should be slaughtered is done in such a humane way that it's not in the sight of other animals. A sharp knife is used, an exceptionally sharp knife is used, and the four neck vessels are cut, be that the jugular vein, the artery, the trachea, and the esophagus. And this is cut in order to ensure that the animal dies. What is the issue, obviously, is the blood inside the animal, because the flesh we can consume. And this is important to understand because we're going to talk about cardiac arrest and we're going to talk about stunning. And therefore, in knowing that the blood is the issue, because we can eat the flesh of an animal, or we can eat the fat of an animal, we can eat that. That's not impermissible. What we can't, there are obviously several parts of the animal that we can't consume, even halal animals. But when it comes to the animal, it's the blood which is the issue. So we've got to ensure that the blood is out of the animal. Now, with all types of procedures, we have to weigh up lots of different sort of what we would call stakeholders. They are obviously the government, which is under pressure from animal rights groups that will try to suggest and push for as humane standards as possible. There will also be religious groups that will demand a type of meat or poultry which will meet their religious needs. And there's also the manufacturers or the suppliers, shall we say, the slaughterhouses, who also have a mechanical, logistical issue to deal with. And it's trying to ensure that we make all that happen. Now, when we speak or when we look in the books of fiqh with regards to slaughtering of animals, then it's quite a simplistic way. Why? Because really that type of fiqh was made for a society that most likely a sort of not a city level society that we see now, but more like small villages with not large populations, and they could meet their own demands for the amount of meat they were eating. Remember, they weren't eating large quantities of meat. Fast forward to 2019, and we live in an era now where fast food takeaways that are literally on our doorstep, and the quantity of chicken and chips, which seems to be the new British meal, is exceptionally high. So the demand is increasing, the methodologies are changing, but we still have our religious requirements. One of the main points, obviously, there's certain things which many Muslims would be quite clear on, that it has to be a Muslim slaughterer. It has to be by the hand. The basmala needs to be recited upon it. But one thing which is now becoming a point of contention, whether it should or shouldn't, is should an animal be stunned or should an animal not be stunned? Meaning, should pre-slaughter an animal be put into such a state where the slaughtering of it will become easier? Now, that's not necessarily the real push behind it. The real push behind it is, when you see from a manufacturing perspective, is that the amount of animals which can go through a slaughterhouse when they are stunned is exceptionally higher than if they're not stunned. So there's a commercial drive. So there's the commercial drive. There's also, as I mentioned to you, the animal humane groups that are lobbying for matters to change, where even though legislation exists which permit Muslims and Jews, for that matter, to be able to continue to have animals which are pre-stunned or stunned before slaughter, that should be removed because it's inhumane. So these exist. So the first thing, and I pointed this out to you, is the regulation that we have, okay, with some post-it notes stuck onto it. And this is the Council Regulation number 1099/2009 of 24th of September 2009 by the Official Journal of the European Union on the protection of animals at the time of killing. Now, if you jump forward to paragraph number 18, in paragraph number 18, it says, since derogation from stunning in case of religious slaughter taking place in slaughterhouses was granted by Directive 93/119/EC, since community provisions applicable to religious slaughter have been transposed differently depending on national context, and considering that national rules take into account dimensions that go beyond the purpose of this regulation, it is important that derogation from stunning animals prior to slaughter should be maintained, leaving, however, a certain level of subsidiary to each member state. As a consequence, this regulation respects the freedom of religion and the right to manifest religion or belief in worship, teaching, practice, and observance as enshrined in Article 10 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. Now, I'm not going to get into Brexit, okay, because that's a whole new kettle of fish. Maybe I need to run a course on Brexit and what's Islam's view on Brexit. But for now, let's stick to stoning chicken and otherwise. Now, so it's obviously talking about member states. The reason why I'm talking about Brexit is because this is a European regulation. And how do European regulations now act upon Britain when we Brexit? Clearly, they won't. So where does Britain now stand? Where would Britain proceed post-Brexit? It does give some flexibility to the, as it terms of the member state, because obviously the European Union is made up of member states. But clearly, within the statute is clearly giving permissibility by law for Muslims and Jews to conduct their I'm sorry, messages are coming up as well, so multitasking, to conduct their slaughtering of animals in such a way that would mean that they are still permissible, which would mean non-stunning. So that exists. So we need to set that stone out first, that non-stunning does exist. And then it talks about numerous ways of stunning, using the captive bolt mechanical stunning, which literally fires a bolt physically through the skull of the animal into the brain. And then we have gas type stunning, which is carbon dioxide, and other, which is electrical, which is the electrical water bath. So we will obviously talk about that as well. Let me just pick up any messages that may be there. Okay, that's fine. So I do excuse me every now and then because I've got my phone here, so I'm getting questions through there. Obviously, going to get questions through here and everywhere else. So I will go off a tangent and try to bring that bring the answer of that question into what I'm discussing with you. We then jump forward to the commission that realized the inhumane aspect of electrical water bath method, because what they found was, if you look at in Annex 2, I'm not going to keep going to that. Now that I've referred to it the first time, you can refer to it yourself. If you go to Annex 2, paragraph 5.9, it mentions that what happens if there's a breakdown or delay in the line. Okay, so if obviously the animals are moving along, and if you've not seen or if you've not visited any slaughterhouses, then whilst I'm talking to you, I guess on another page, you can, or on your phone, you can just open up on a YouTube, search on the YouTube of what a slaughterhouse looks like, a poultry slaughterhouse, and what a water bath stunner looks like. So you'll see that basically the animals are shackled upside down. So as you get to the place where the animals are coming in, the truck will reverse in. There's blue lights everywhere. The blue lights are so that it keeps the birds calm. The animals are brought in sort of like trays, like if back in the day, or even in shops nowadays, you get those trays of bread. They're brought in there, they're quiet. And then as these trays go onto a conveyor belt, this conveyor belt goes all the way around until the shackles start. Then there's so many men, half a dozen men, obviously it depends on the size of the slaughterhouse, and they're picking birds up and clipping them onto some shackles. And they hang upside down on these shackles. And they're no more than 10, 15 centimeters apart of the shackle. So the birds are all in contact with one another. And then they kind of go round on this conveyor belt, all upside down, until they come into the part where the slaughterhouse, and that's in like a separate area. So when they go into there, then there's the water bath, a stunner, which is sort of, I don't know, it can vary, I guess, but 2, 3, 4 meters wide, and it's raised. So the animals are not raised or dropped, it's raised. And as they come across, it's raised, the animals are immersed in this water, and then an electric current is passed through. The bird forms part of the circuit, and once the current flows through, then the water bath is, they come out of the water bath, and they're already stunned now, so they're not moving, and then you have lots of men, carrying out the slaughter with a knife. It then goes past there, and obviously then it goes to defeathering, de-skinning, and the rest of it, and it carries on. That's not important to us. This part is important to us. But what happens if the conveyor belt, stops? Well, if the conveyor belt stops, then obviously there's going to be a problem, because some of the birds which are in the water bath stunner at that time, then either they're going to be already dead and drowned, because when they're in that stunner, the conveyor belt's not moving, they're trying to, they're going to drown. Okay, that may happen, or they may miss the stun altogether. So there's an issue there, and it mentions in this page 17 in Article 27.3 says, no later than the 8th of December 2013, the Commission shall submit to the European Parliament and to the Council a report on the various stunning methods for poultry, and in particular, multiple bird water bath stunners, taking into account animal welfare aspects, as well as socio-economic and environmental aspects. They clearly realized that there was an animal welfare issue when poultry are placed shackled upside down and brought through the system. Furthermore, it mentions that this was now the European Food Safety Authority in 2004 highlighted two problems with multiple bird water bath stunners. They said, inversion and shackling of birds is painful, which can bring about bones dislocation and fractures, especially for spent laying hens. Spent laying hens are those hens that used to lay eggs and they're no longer producing eggs. So they're no use now as sort of egg producing hens. So they're now sent for basically meat for consumption. So that was the first point they raised. The amount of current delivered to each bird varies due to the impedance of each bird and cannot be controlled. Now, this is not this is not some Maulana saying this or some scholar saying this that we may belittle and say, well, what does he know about science? What does he know about, this method? This is the European Food Safety Authority in 2004. This is over 15 years ago. And I repeat that because you'll find that my conclusions are very much tied to these. One is the inversion and shackling of birds is painful, which can bring about bones dislocation and fractures, especially for spent laying hens. And the amount of current delivered to each bird varies due to the impedance, the electrical resistance of each bird, and cannot be controlled. So for us, both of these are of a grave concern. Our Sharia method is a method which is to bring less or no harm to the animal by the cut that is made. And when the sharp knife makes that cut, then that is like, for example, when you use an exceptionally sharp knife, if ever you've used one, and you cut your hand, you don't actually feel the pain at the time you cut your hand. It's only when you put your hand under water or some salt or some masala gets into it that you feel the pain. So this will do the same. And when a cut is made for the bird, then in a very short space of time, it's unconscious almost immediately, and it doesn't register the rest of the pain. So these are 2 points which are very serious that we need to concern ourselves with. So what I'll turn to now is the methods which exist. Okay, these are the methods which exist to date. And there are a number of methods, and I've already explained to you why is it that a bird should be unconscious before slaughtering. What's the rationale? And we've talked about the economic drive. We've already mentioned that. We've talked about one other thing, which I've not mentioned actually, is that when a bird is not stunned, okay, then clearly it's going to flap about. So if you slit its neck, then the normal muscle convulsions which occur, which is basically the muscles demanding blood, demanding oxygenated blood, will start to move around. And as they're moving around, and as I said, there's only a 15-centimeter gap between each chicken that's there, each hen that's there, then what happens is that there's a good chance that it will snap its wings. Now, most of the food that's sold, when you buy your chicken wings, you may not want your chicken wings snapped. So it's demand from the public that's driving this. And as I mentioned to you right at the beginning, the majority of the people who are eating this food are Muslims, particularly when we look at lamb, but even in chicken, there's a disproportionate quantity that are consumed by Muslims. Our insatiable appetite to be fed nice chicken and nice meat is pushing the industry to push into this kind of area. So we then next move into gas mixtures. Now, gas is another way that animals can be. This avoids shackling and it ensures that they don't get hurt in that process. And there's no kind of, electric, there's no captive bolt. Obviously, for hens, there's no captive bolt anyway. You're not putting them into a bath, a water bath, and passing a current through it. So as a result, you're not kind of charging them up. You're not possibly causing them pain. or causing them death. But when they do gas mixtures, because it's not such a finite science, then there's a push towards ensuring that the animals die rather than are stunned. So this would be a little bit of a problem area for us. Having said that, at the moment, there's not much work done in this area, and that's something that they could potentially look at. So we'll come back to that. There's also something called low atmosphere pressure stunning. And what does low atmosphere pressure stunning mean? Low atmosphere pressure stunning is when they start to replace oxygen, okay, with something else, so another gas. They avoid carbon dioxide because carbon dioxide is acidic. It's an acidic gas, and that causes problems and causes pain. But again, it's been considered to be something which is not, is irreversible. The aim is to kill the animal. So again, this would be problematic for us. So low atmosphere pressure stunning would be impermissible because it's stunning to kill, not stunning for unconscious. So gas mixtures is a possibility. Low atmosphere pressure stunning is not something that we could look at. There's then the mechanical methodology, which is the bolt, which penetrates in the case of some, and not. So in some cases, the bolt will act like it will actually go through the skull of the bird, and when it goes through the skull of the bird, it will basically give it exceptional brain damage, and the animal will die. And in the case of where it doesn't go through, it's just a knock, then this would be concussive. Now, the problem we have with this is this is going to cause immense pain, but there's certain types of birds that we're permitted to consume it. And one is the mawquda. And the mawquda is that type of bird that was beaten, okay? Or the mutaraddiya, which is the one which has fallen from a height. So both of those animals have died due to what we would call percussive damage. And this percussive damage, and these are mentioned in the Quran, where Allah has made this impermissible. So that's why mechanical methodology would be considered as impermissible. So far, gas mixtures is a possibility, but very little work has been done on this. So this is something that requires more research. Electrical is obviously our topic of today. So in terms of electrical, what we would say is that in electrical, there's two types of stunning. One type of stunning is what you would call head only. So when we speak about head only, this would be that the animals, there's something attached to the animal's head, and however it's done, some kind of electrodes. And what these electrodes will do is that a charge is put through this animal. And when a charge is put through this animal, then what happens is this animal becomes unconscious. Now, to achieve head-only stunning, excuse me, let me just get some water. To achieve head-only stunning would still mean that the animal has to be shackled because there's no other way around it, because the animal needs to be kept in one place. Now, because it would not be possible literally to put little caps on top of each animal because the hen is exceptionally small, then the animal would be inverted into the water bath, but only up to its head. And that brings me to another point, which I will mention as well, is that when it comes to birds put into the multiple bird water bath stunner, then it's not just an immersion up to its head, but it's an immersion on its top part of its body. Now, you will find out why I mention that to you and its relevance shortly, inshallah. So we still have to shackle the bird, which is going to be problematic. So the bird is still shackled. We also have to ensure that the head is making good contact with the water. That's and then we would try to put the right amount of current through. And what you'd happen, but you'd have to have two currents. One current would be to stun the bird, and the other current would be aimed probably at its spine to limit its flapping. So there'd be a double current, and you would try to make the voltage, which would bring about a certain current to each bird in such a way that it would be bird specific. And that's important. And again, when we get onto the electrical, the water bath stunning, then this will become clearer to you as to why is it that this needs to be so specific. And when they've looked and they've done some work on this, they've seen the isoelectric EEG and found that this animal continued to lose blood and death occur. So this is something which is a potential interesting area. However, the problem still remains. The problem being that these animals will still have to be shackled upside down. These birds will still have to be shackled upside down. So that's still going to be a problem. And the advantage of it is that it no longer sort of electrocutes, it no longer sends a standard current across to every single bird, which is fixed, but rather it is bird specific. And again, like I said, all this will come to light when we speak about the multiple bird water bath stunner. So we can see that that's an option as well. But again, this is rarely used because of this drive, this economic drive, this push basically for having lots of animals for consumption means that this is the key driver. This is and this is why little research is done both in this type of stunning, head only stunning, and little research is done in gas mixtures because commercially they're currently not viable. Where because it would mean because each slaughterhouse, for example, and I was looking at it mentioned here, for instance, that 25% of abattoirs at the moment in the UK incorporate halal as well in them. Yet Muslims make up 4.5% of the UK population. So even though Muslims make up 4.5% of the UK population, 25% of abattoirs incorporate halal. And then one you might think, well, why is that? Well, one is obviously Muslims consume quite considerable amount, which I've been reiterating throughout this lecture. And the second thing is for export purposes. France, for example, is a huge Muslim population. So France is a place where you can end up receiving halal food from halal meat, rather, from Britain. New Zealand, for example, most of its lamb is halal. So even though the New Zealand lamb which arrives in UK, even though it may not be labeled as halal, is actually halal because of the fact that New Zealand also exports to the Middle East. And when it exports to the Middle East demands are halal. So you're seeing that we are actually, in a way, controlling the market. And I'm going to get to that point when I conclude today's lecture about controlling the market and what authority and power we have. And that's the reason why I've emphasized several times about our consumption rate, both within the UK and outside of the UK, and the demands we can make. Now, this paper in particular, my research in particular was on the multiple bird water bath stunner. I have, just because it's a nice time to kind of bring a summary of what I've discussed so far, because I can imagine I am going at some pace. I apologize for that. The reason being is that I've got a considerable amount to cover, and I'm conscious of time. We're already 3:10, and we have 40 minutes or 40 odd minutes left, and I do want to give you opportunity for question and answer as well, and there's a considerable amount to go. But you have in your own time, at your own leisure, go over the recording again, and because the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, so you can go over it and maybe pause it every now and then just to catch breath more than anything else, to kind of see what I'm going through. I did say as well at the beginning, it is a technical subject. It's not something, unfortunately, we get lots of people making comments on it, but don't have any expertise in the area. This requires expertise not only in the slaughter business, the methodology of slaughtering, but more so of experimental design and also of research. How is research carried out? How is data analyzed? And because a lot of the stuff that I've had to do is analyze data. There's been lots of research reports that have been written with lots of data. And it's taking that data, carrying out some analysis, looking obviously at their conclusions as well, and then putting something together which can then be understandable. So it is very technical, and it requires technical expertise in a number of areas. So please do bear that in mind. The first thing that I went through, I gave a short introduction, if you recall, right at the beginning. The short introduction was to explain the whole halal market, what it is, what its demands are, what it can do, what the costs are, what's the methodology of halal in the most broadest sense. I then looked at the regulations, and I showed you certain regulations which permit Muslims and Jews to be able to slaughter without stunning, and went through the whole area of how the stunning is a problem. Also, the regulatory bodies themselves, especially the European Food Safety Authority, recognize that there was a serious concern for the animal welfare for the multiple bird water bath stunner. The two things were the inversion and the shackling of the birds was painful, which was bringing about bones dislocation and fractures, especially for the more thinner, weaker, spent laying hens. Similarly, the amount of electric current being delivered to each bird varied because of the impedance, which is electrical resistance of each bird, and that cannot be controlled. These two things led the European Food Safety Authority to say that we need immediate research carried out into this and an alternative sought. That was in 2004, and we're now in 2019, and we don't have an alternative. Why, you might say, we don't have an alternative? Well, I will get to that right now, because I then went over several methodologies of stunning. I talked about gas mixtures and said that there is a possibility for gas mixtures from an Islamic perspective, that might be a way forward, but it requires considerable research. I dismissed low atmosphere pressure stunning as a viable halal option. Mechanical was seriously problematic. Why? Because of the clear verse mentioning where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions wal munkhaniqa, and he also mentions, sorry, not the munkhaniqa, the mawquda and the mutaraddiya. These are animals which receive percussive means of bringing about their stunning, and these were termed as impermissible. I then just touched upon the head-only stunning, and then I concluded by saying that when you have 25% of your abattoirs that are delivering halal, and quite considerable of them, you would probably say more of them are stunning, then if you're going to approach each one and to tell them that they need to now take out their stunning machine, this huge machine that they've paid for, and they now need to put something else which could be more costly, then the bottom line is this is a business. Okay, this is a business, and people are in businesses to make money. But they are in a business to make money, but we are the consumer, and we are a serious consumer. So we can then demand that the businesses respect our needs and respect our demands. So that's just concluding the first part of today's lecture. The second part of today's lecture, I'm going to be looking at the multiple bird water bath stunner. So it's quite simple. It's, for those of you who studied basic physics, you'll know, for example, that the current, to make it, you're basically making a circuit. Okay, so the current flows from the bath through to the birds, through to the shackle line, and the shackle line is the earth. Okay, there's a huge variation in this process because of numerous things. I'm going to list them for you. Electrical frequency, the type of waveform, whether it's sine or square wave, the current applied to each bird, the number of birds, the duration of stunning, and the time the blood vessels are cut after exsanguation. So there's 6 things, and on our fingers there, that are variables and are difficult, if not, well, some are not impossible to control, but some variables are non-controllable. I remind you, electrical frequency, waveform, whether it's sine or square wave, current applied to each bird, the number of birds, the duration of stunning, the time the blood vessels are cut after exsanguation. So you've got so many possibilities, so many variables. And in all my research, I have not seen any research. Now there may be in, the Malaysian, written in Malay, and I can't read Malay, but I could not find any sources in Arabic that have carried out a thorough research looking at all these variables and determining whether the animals are still alive after stunning. Now, I'll just show you some to each camera. So I'll show this to you first. So this is what it looks like. There you go. Okay, so that's what the water bath stunner looks like. Hope you can see it there. Okay, and I can see that it's in mirror mode. So I'll put a mirror in front of your screen. Okay, if not, just get the paper. So the multiple bird water bath stunner, you can see, for example, that this is the direction of the movement of the shackle line. So the birds are shackled together. They look nice and quiet, but that's not the case. They're not as distant as that. They're much closer than that. And then you have this kind of ramp which pushes the bird there, so it flops into the water. And when it flops into the water, you can see its head is immersed into the water, and some part of its chest. Normally, the water is higher than that, and this is the submerged electrode. There are the metal shackles. There's the earth electrode. So you're making a circuit, and obviously it's going to earth. The current is going to earth. Sorry to remind you of your physics days back in GCSE or whichever equivalent you have. And now I'll show you a real one. Again, I'll try to get closer to the camera. You can see that one there. And there's the birds there. You can see them on the left there. And so you focus well. Okay, so you can see the birds coming into the machine there. Right? You can see them shackled upside down. Okay. That bird doesn't have a neck. Anyway, must be tucked in. So you see these birds coming along. That's how close they are. That's the water bath, that big metal thing. It goes, so they come along here. Okay. That's the water bath. That's an electric. So they're in there. Water level is there. And obviously there's a charge going through. And then they come out the other end. That's the method. That's currently how stunner works. So what are the requirements to ensure good stunning via the bath? So these are what they need. They want sufficient voltage to the water bath to ensure that every bird receives the recommended minimum current. They can't control the maximum, but the recommended minimum. Okay. The electrode in the water bath must extend the complete length of the water bath. And it is essential there is good contact between the shackle and the legs of the birds. The heads of the birds must be completely immersed in the bath. In order to ensure that that's good, is they will push the bird significantly lower, because remember the minimum is that the head must be completely immersed. So we always err on caution, don't we? So we make sure that the bird is covered. So you'll find that the bird, if I was upside down, and I'm not a bird either, but if I was upside down, then the water level would be up to the chest of the bird. And the key thing in the chest is the heart. Because remember that if a charge goes through the head of the bird, it's going to go through his heart as well. And when it goes through his heart, and I'm sure you've seen the old defibrillators, what will happen is it will push the heart into cardiac arrest. Once the heart is in cardiac arrest, there's no blood going to be leaving the animal. That blood is going to stay in the animal. Even when the slaughterer puts a knife across the throat, there's no pumping mechanism coming. I don't even know why my heart is on my right hand side, actually. My heart should be here. Okay, so there's no pumping mechanism which is pushing the blood out. So I'm pointing out key things here to you. So when I conclude, hopefully you will have retained this information. But one thing which they've not mentioned here is the impedance of the bird. What I mean by impedance is the electrical resistance. Okay, obviously when an electric current passes through a good conductor like copper, then it will have very, very low resistance. Okay, or what we call continuity. It will have high, this continuity would be good because it'd be exceptionally low resistance. But as soon as you go through something else, like a human, okay, or a bird, then a bird has different water content. It has different fat. It has different meat. Each bird varies. Yes, they may look the same size, but they're not the same size. Now, that's not been mentioned. Now, when the current varies from bird to bird, then that will mean that some little birds are getting a very high current. And some big birds are missing that, because they will. What you have in data analysis, or when you're looking at data, you have something called a Gaussian distribution. So when you have this Gaussian distribution, you have some data extremely low, some data extremely high, and most of your data in the middle. So when you're going to set the parameters for your water bath, you're going to set it for the average. You're not going to set it for the little tiny birds, and you're not going to set it for the big birds, okay? You're going to set it for average. And even if this is only over a kilogram of weight difference, you will still get that Gaussian distribution. So you'll find the little birds are not just being stunned unconscious, they're being stunned to death. And you'll find that the big birds are not being stunned at all and are just actually getting electric shocks, because it's not enough to knock them unconscious. So is there such a big change or a big difference in impedance? Well, you have what are called broiler birds, and broilers are the ones which are normally reared for consumption, and hens. So the bird impedance varies in a broiler from 1,000 to 2,600 ohms. That's a massive difference. And in hens, it varies from 1,900 to 7,000 ohms. So you can see that the impedance, the electrical resistance, the resistance for the current to flow through the bird is a huge difference. Huge difference. And as a result, you will see that. Now, there's a paper by Sparry, Kettlewell, Pace, and Wetler, 1993, page 268 and 9, in which they make a point, and I want to quote that. As an example, if four birds with impedances of 886, 1250, 1194, and 1498 ohms, which is not that much of a not varying much compared to what we've already seen, are in the bath simultaneously, then with a supply voltage of 100 volts and a source resistance of 100 ohms, the total current would be 220 milliamps. The average current per bird would be 55.2 milliamps. So that's the average per bird. However, the individual current will be 41.3, 62.3, 65.3, and 52, respectively, a variation of 20% from the average value. These differences are more difficult to predict if the current flows in alternative low impedance pathways within or externally to a bird and in parallel to the brain or heart. So what we're saying here, let's just pick a value. Let's just say 55 milliamps is the suitable charge which would knock a bird unconscious. 55 milliamps. Now we've got a bird which is getting only 41.3 milliamps. So the bird that's getting out 41.3 milliamps is not going to be knocked unconscious. Because if we've said 55 is what is required to knock the bird unconscious, that's the average, and this bird is only getting 41.3, then it's not even going to be knocked out. So all it's getting is little electric shocks, which are going to be extreme. I say little electric shocks, which is going to be extremely painful. The bird which is at 62.3 is getting more than 55. And the one at 65 is definitely getting more. Now, I don't know at what stage or what current the bird will actually be killed. But there's a possibility now that the bird who's getting 65 milliamps of current may die as a result of the electric current. So this variable is a serious variable and requires work to be done. And this is why there is the report that was written in 2004 saying that there's animal welfare concerns. Now, there's ways of obviously determining current in the laboratory, okay, where they can do these tests. But out in the field, it's very difficult. And this is why it's very much, as I call it, a black art. Okay, it's not really a science. It's a little bit of that, turn that up a little bit, turn that down a little bit, looks okay. There's not much done. Because if you look at the number of birds, you know, in some cases, I think there's nearly 200 birds per minute going through it. Now, if there's 200 birds per minute, you really think somebody is there to be checking every single bird and what process it would require to check the bird if it's alive. It is unfortunate, but this demand that we have for poultry and lambs is causing this inviable situation that we have. So you can see that this is a great cause for concern. And you know, when we do tests, you find that some people say, oh, you know, Muftsab, I went to a slaughterhouse, and we heard this very recently as well, somewhere in Blackburn, if I'm not mistaken, in Blackburn in the UK. Somebody mentioned that a few chaps went to a few ulama went to a slaughterhouse and they pulled a few hens off after they'd been stunned and they didn't hang about for long, and then they were on their own little legs and ran off. You know, that's not the scientific way. Okay, the scientific way is like things of this nature. For example, you have here Prince et al. 467 broilers were stunned for 10 seconds using a pulsed direct current in an electrified water bath for 60, 80, 100, 120, and 150 milliamps at frequency of 70, 100, 200, 400, 800, and 1500 hertz. Okay, now that's an experiment. It requires an experimental design. We are embarrassing ourselves, unfortunately, if we go and make statements like that I went to a slaughterhouse, I pulled a hen off after it got stunned and it walked off. That's one. 200 odd are going through per minute. That's one. 200 odd are going through per minute. How many are going through per day? How many are going through per week? How many are going through per year? Are you really going to say to me that by testing one chicken, you are now going to base your conclusion that stunning does not kill an animal? As I said, it's farcical, and we're embarrassing ourselves when we make statements of that nature. Here you can see a proper experimental design. When the stunning current was set at 120 milliamps at a frequency of 70 or 100 hertz, or when at 150 milliamps with a frequency of 200 hertz, then more than 80% of the birds did not resume breathing. Now, the couple of slaughterhouses, the few slaughterhouses that I've been to, and also the others that I've made contact with, I asked them, I said, can you please provide me a research report, a research experiment carried out by you or your scientists at your abattoir, at your slaughterhouse, explaining why you've selected that particular voltage and that particular frequency. None of them have provided that to me. So then I say to them, how did you go about selecting the voltage, and how did you go about selecting the frequency? And they say, oh, because that should be okay. That's okay. We were told to set that. So when you hear things like that and you think, goodness me, this is about, we talk about animal welfare. You see the animal welfare people getting up in arms when they say, oh, stunning should be made illegal. Why are Muslims allowed to avoid stunning? Why are Jews allowed? This should be made illegal. They should not have this possibility. They should not have this exception from the law. And then they sit idly by when you see these machines doing what they're doing at the rate that they're doing at, when we can clearly see that there is not single slaughterhouse, as I said, that I spoke to gave to me a scientific study, a full research paper in which they had carried out analyzing in how they determine the voltage and frequency for their stunner. They just went by manufacturing advice, and there are so many variables, and we're going to get to more variables shortly. But I just wanted to make that point because recently I attended a meeting maybe a few months ago now, and these statements were made in front of me by some people, by some imams who said that they'd gone and done this. And as I said, it's laughable to say this, that people actually believe that is a scientific way. It is so far away from it. It's close to embarrassing, if not there. We have the obviously EFSA concerns that have already been mentioned. These are other concerns which were raised by Hindel, Lambuj, Reimat, Werkel, and Grittens, in which they said, the real risk of pre-stun shocks, because pre-stun shocks are those which don't render the bird unconscious. All they do is cause it pain. So the real risk, because obviously, as I've explained to you, those 4 birds earlier, that the current is not sufficient to render it unconscious. The current is too low. And as a result, all it's doing is getting. So for example, if you ever been to a light switch with a wet hand or something, and you get a little spark come off it, okay? And you get a little shock. Now, obviously, that's just a little tingle shock. It's not major, but you can have a pretty decent shock, which can throw you to the other side of the room. And you won't knock you unconscious, but it hurts, okay? It will hurt you. But there are times where, God forbid, you can get electrocuted and you're still stuck to the actual source of the electric, and you'll be in that pain until someone comes along and use a wooden broom or something to move you away from it and switch the power off, okay? So being knocked unconscious is the process of the stunner. But some birds, as we've seen, because the current is so low, are just getting what's called pre-stun shocks. Suboptimum stuns, and obviously add that the suspension of conscious birds upside down, which has been proven to cause pain and damage. And also we've seen the variation of the electrical current due to differences of the chicken's impedances are of serious concern. They're of serious concerns to true animal welfare experts and those scientists that are researching in that area, but they're also concerned to Muslims because Muslims are supposed to be the ambassadors, the leaders when it comes to animal welfare. And unfortunately, because our appetites and greed has got the better of us, we are demanding more, and we are now even looking at and saying, well, really, should we be, stunning is not that much of a big problem. It's okay, it's the needs of the community, it's the needs of the market. It's something we need to do, and we sort of, making it out like it's not a major issue, because again, we're speaking not necessarily from using, no, we're not speaking from our brains or our heads, we're speaking from our stomachs, and that's the problem. There's also, it says, Shields and Raj in 2010 said that there is an admission that there's very little research that's been conducted rather into the effectiveness of electrical settings used in stun baths. And I said to you, I found nothing. I've asked abattoirs for their research, and I found nothing. In fact, the work that has been done has been focusing on ensuring the birds are rendered unconscious rather than if they're killed or not, because non-Muslims do not care if the animal is killed. In fact, they would prefer that the stunning does kill the animal. It is Muslims that have the issue that the animal needs to still be alive beforehand. So we're now at 3:30, and there's still some bits I need to cover before we get to the conclusion, before we get to question and answer. So I will try to finish in the next 10 minutes or so. So please kind of, maybe I've explained it so well that you haven't got any questions. Alhamdulillah. Let's go with that premise and see if that works. Let me just quickly check that nothing's come through on here. No, all is good, mashallah. Let's see if we're still running on our Twitter feed. Yeah, looks like it. Okay, so all is good so far, alhamdulillah. So we will, as I said, Maghrib is drawing close for us, so we will go through this and then inshallah hopefully conclude by about 3:50 or something, maybe before 3:45. We will conclude at 3:45, give you 10-15 minutes for questions. If you do have questions, then maybe if you start putting them up, and don't ask questions for the sake of asking questions, obviously, but if you do have questions, please do put them up, and then at least I will see the quantity of questions that we have, and I'll know when to conclude by. So returning back to this, okay, I mentioned the bird variation is significant. And when the bird variation is significant, we know, obviously, I'm going to have to remind you about Ohm's law now. So Ohm's law, I hope you remember it, which is voltage equals current times resistance, okay? So remember, voltage is something we can control. The current is something we can control, but the resistance of the bird is something we can't control. And that becomes the problem, because we're not knowing what the resistance is means that the bird will receive a different current. Some will receive a low current, and when they receive a low current, they will feel pain and distress due to the shocks, and others will receive a higher current, and this will bring about cardiac arrest. And as I mentioned to you about cardiac arrest, the cardiac arrest, when I find my heart, which is of course here, the cardiac arrest will mean that the heart is no longer pumping, and when the heart is no longer pumping, it will not push out the blood of the animal. And when you're dipping birds up to their chests in water with the current going through it, then this will bring about cardiac arrest, especially if the current is significantly higher. So what are the bird variables? I've talked about the variables which bring about a variable in impedance, electrical resistance. They're numerous. They are the body size of the animal, which is obvious, the body muscle, the fat content, the condition of the plumage. Also, simple things like the feathers being dry or wet or dirty, the depth the bird is immersed. A short-necked bird, is going to be put in deeper, okay, than a bird which is relatively long-necked. So you've got all those issues as well. The contact on the shackles, because remember this is a circuit. So depending on how the shackles are in touch with the animal's leg. Because if it's a loose connection, okay, if it's a very loose connection, and remember the charge is going through the shackle, then that will mean obviously that there's not much, it's a poor circuit. And if it's a poor circuit, there's going to be a lot of lost current, which means this animal will get less. But if it's a big chunky legged chicken, and so that's a really good contact, then the really good contact means that it's going to get all the full whack of the charge going through. So, and this contact is important because when you compare male and female birds, you find that the female birds require a larger or higher current because their legs are smaller, then they make a poorer contact. And because their legs are smaller, they make this poorer contact, which means a higher current is required. Now, remember, there are male and female birds being slaughtered at that time. And I'm not going to go through, because I said I'm conscious of time now. I'm not going to go through all the various statistics and data that I put there. Again, if you can find this paper online, inshallah, the stunning of poultry, the Sharia perspective on multiple bird water bath stunning of poultry, you'll find all the data in there. It's on our not YouTube, it's on our Telegram channel as well. Inshallah, you'll find it on there. And there's more along the same sorts of lines where we find, for example, that one thing I've not touched upon is the conductivity of the water. So the water bath itself, its conductivity can vary depending on what salts are mixed in it, the hardness of the water, because depending on where you are in the UK or anywhere else for that matter, the hardness of the water, the minerals within the water, that will also change the current flowing through. Okay, so I hope that I've been able to demonstrate that it is a black art. It's not a science. There's so many variables. There's so many variables in the bird. There's so many variables in the water bath. There's so many variables from the electric current that's coming through that it is so difficult to control. In essence, what you're doing is you're using a hammer to break a walnut, meaning that as long as you use a hammer, every walnut will break. But the only problem you have is some walnuts will get smashed to smithereens. That's the problem you have. Is that because if you use a hammer, because sometimes you can just flick it open with the pistachios that we eat. Sometimes a pistachio you can just flick open. Sometimes a pistachio needs a little bit of help, so you might use your teeth. And sometimes the pistachio is so stubborn, you need to bang him against a wall. So what you're doing is you're taking into consideration the variable which exists in the pistachio, and you're taking a different approach depending on what it is. But if you wanted every pistachio to be open, then you would say smack every pistachio against a hard surface. Now that would be fine for the hard nuts, but what it would mean is the ones which are already open would be smashed to smithereens, and the ones that were partially open are going to be pretty much destroyed. So it doesn't work to take that kind of approach. Because it's now 15:37, I'm going to jump a little bit, and I'm just going to go into this determining death in poultry after stunning. Some people put the case forward and said, look, why can't we keep the stunner there, but have some method in place in order to determine if the bird has died or not because of the stunning, or not, or if the bird is still alive. So, for example, we find that even though we demand such a huge we control the market, but we have this kind of carefree attitude. There's little work done in this area. I could not find any research, unfortunately. We got money in places that we don't know what to do with. Alhamdulillah, we're building masajids all over the place, which is a good thing. But surely some of that money needs to go towards research. I could not find any research carried out about post-stunning as to what state the animal was in, the bird was in. And this is important research that needs to be carried out. Some people have said, oh, the bird moved after it was stunned. But really, this doesn't mean anything at all, because you can see movement in animals much after, even when they've actually had their throats slit. So movement is not a measure. Some have said there's a heartbeat, okay, that the animal still has a heartbeat. But we can see that even if brain stem death takes place, so the little research that I could find, that even though brain stem death takes place, the heart continues to beat, because there's oxygen supply to the heart. And when it's the oxygen supply to the heart goes, then the animal will die. So immediately after slaughtering the animal, immediately after stunning, even if the animal is dead, brain dead, it will still have a heartbeat. So that's not really a true sign of life either. And then the bleeding out. Some people say that only if the animal is alive, it will bleed out. But we've seen research which clearly shows that animals, even if they are dead, will continue to bleed out. So just to summarize this second session that I just went through with you before I now conclude. So in the second session, my focus in particular was on multiple bird water bath stunning. And I explained and I showed you what a multiple bird water bath stunner looks like. I then started to talk about the big issues that exist, that this is not some kind of delicate scientific process, that this is literally a hammer breaking walnuts. There's so many issues that need to be taken into consideration: the minimum current being issued to each bird, the shackles and how they're connected to the bird, the electrode in the needed to be across in the water bath. But what we saw was this huge variable in bird to bird, whether it was due to gender, a female bird and a male bird, or whether it was due to the fact of the size of the bird, its plumage, its body mass in terms of fat and muscle. And we saw such huge variables which could not be contained. The experts, the scientists were saying that this is something which is beyond our control. This is something which cannot be done. And we saw, because of the way the bird is being placed into the water, more than likely cardiac arrest was taking place. And even if cardiac arrest wasn't taking place because of the fact that the bird was being immersed so deeply into the water, the charge of the current that was going through was also an issue. So we have one question, alhamdulillah. So I will answer that question just as I conclude this last part. And then we saw, for instance, that the variability wasn't just restricted to the bird, but the variability was restricted to the water bath itself because of conductivity, water hardness, and lots of other things as well. And then we had these kind of non-scientific ways of determining whether the bird was still alive. And we saw things like, looking for a heartbeat, seeing if the bird walks off, seeing if the bird bleeds out, seeing things of that nature. But this was done in such a, first of all, there's very little research. The research which is there goes against using these. And the things that we've seen, these anecdotal, couple of imams turning up at a slaughterhouse and picking up a few hens and seeing if they walk off or not, we see that's most, this is the slaughterhouses that I've had experience with, they slaughter in the region of 200 birds per minute. There's no scientific process in place that can determine whether those birds are alive after that. It is so difficult to control. It is so difficult to do. Okay, so let's now with 1342 bring this to a conclusion, inshallah. So the conclusion is, and I will actually read out the conclusion to you if you don't mind. Commercial multiple bird water bath stunners have been shown to be ineffective as a means to stun poultry in order to subsequently slaughter by knife cut. Due to the large variability in the bird's impedances, it is clear, remember birds' impedances is the electrical resistance, the resistance it has for the current to go through it. It is clear that a significant number of birds will not be stunned effectively, and as a result, they will suffer pain and distress before slaughter, which goes against the spirit of Islamic slaughter. We do not allow any pain to be inflicted on an animal before we slaughter it. Remember, the slaughtering has only been made halal, permissible for us, let me use that word, because of our need for meat and for poultry. Allah has blessed us, and He has given us these animals for us to consume, but not to harm. That's why we can't take animals for target practice. That's why we can't abuse animals. Even if we see a spider, we shouldn't kill it. We should pick it up and take it outside. Only those animals we can kill that are actually trying to hurt us. So even if a wasp gets into our room, we should open a window and let it fly out. But if it's, trying to do target practice on our eyeball or something, then there's some permissibility to deal with it appropriately. Scorpions, things which we know, snakes, things we know which will come to kill us or hurt us. But not for things like birds. So it goes against, even if the slaughtered bird is considered halal. Now we're looking at two different things here. One is the what I call the Sharia ethics, and this is something we'll be writing on, and I will conclude with that as well. So hopefully, if I don't forget, remind me. However, more significantly, there will be a large proportion of birds that would die during the process of stunning due to cardiac arrest, and their subsequent slaughter would be inconsequential. It's irrelevant. The bird is already dead. The knife passed on its neck is just for the sake of doing it, appease our guilt. Allahu Alam. And therefore, these birds will not be considered halal for Muslim consumption. The other point is there. The other point is, if there was a means of determining those birds which had died and separating them from the ones that didn't, then that could facilitate a more favorable understanding of the multiple bird water bath stunner. However, that is not the case. Taking into consideration that current regulations permit Muslims to be exempted from having to stun, I've already shown you the legislation, the European Union legislation, which permits Muslims to not stun their animals before slaughter, then this would render the stunning process as haram. And if you know my fatwa work, I don't use that word often. I would say I very hardly use that word, but I'm not shied away from using that word there. And I hope I've demonstrated why I've reached that conclusion. As it is either harming birds, and harming birds is haram, or killing them prior to slaughter, which is also haram. Also, the birds which are killed by stunning are equally haram. Why? Because the process is haram. Furthermore, as there is no viable means of determining live birds from dead ones, then all the birds from this process would be considered as mashkuk, doubtful, because we do not know which one was stunned effectively and which one wasn't. Having said that, those birds that are stunned effectively and reach the slaughterer's life while still alive, albeit unconscious, then that animal will be considered as halal. Okay, I use that because the process itself is problematic, but that animal which has been stunned and is still alive and it reaches the slaughterer's knife whilst it was alive, and if you eat that one, is permissible. But which one is that one? How do you know the one that you're buying, the burger that you're buying, or the chicken that it was that one? You just don't know. That's the problem. Having said that, therefore, it is not the concept of stunning which is the issue, even though it is not a sunnah practice, and as a result, some have argued for its prohibition, but the effect this stunning process has on the birds. All this talking of birds, I think I've got a feather down my throat or something. I know. Looking ahead, those Muslim halal certifying agencies who see stunning of poultry as a means to assist in the slaughtering process, then they should join animal welfare groups to move to head-only poultry stunning of non-shackle birds and certain gas methods, and lobby for research to be conducted so correct electrical and gas parameters are determined for commercial application. In short, what I want to say before I turn my attention to the questions, in short, what I'm trying to say, we have a Sharia. Now, the Sharia that we have is something which will benefit all of mankind, not just Muslims. I've shown you by the statistics that I've shared with you that literally we control the market. Muslims control the market. The reason why we control the market is because we are the main consumers. We eat chicken like there's no tomorrow, and we eat lamb like there was no yesterday. Okay, we eat lots of animals. You know, a disproportionate amount of animals we use, we consume rather. We consume a disproportionate. Now we have a Sharia, and we consume a disproportionate amount of animals. Hold on. So shouldn't we be dictating the market? Shouldn't we be controlling the market? Shouldn't we be pushing for, as I mentioned right at the end of the conclusion, shouldn't we be pushing for research methodologies, practices which don't harm the animal, which everybody will be on our side? We saw the European agencies would be on our side. The animal welfare people will be on our side. Forget that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be happy with us. And by us following the Sharia, and this is a new area that I'm working in at the moment, which is Sharia ethics. By us following the Sharia, everybody else will benefit. The non-Muslim will benefit because our method will be the most animal welfare method that exists, because no one can say that these animals which have been slaughtered by this stun method has been good to the animals. They're saying it themselves that this is not right. So you might ask the question, why are we not moving then? We're not moving because it's economically viable. It's making lots of money. So there's no push to do so. Anyway, it's now 48. I'm just going to pick up this questions. Assalamu alaikum. Can the admins please send us a paper? Yes, I will try to send it on to the admin. If not, as I said, it is available on our Telegram channel right now. All you do, if you are on Telegram, you just search the name of the paper, which is Stunning of Poultry, and you should get it. Are the non-stunned birds hurt whilst they are hung upside down because of their serious movements, thus wouldn't hurting these birds before? Absolutely, you're absolutely correct that the animals are hurt when they are upside down, whether stunned or non-stunned. That's absolutely correct. Even that will not take away from the stunning aspect, does not take that part away. So that's just one area at the moment. We then need to go into this other area of saying, right, you see, unfortunately, we're not leaders. Our community is not a community of leaders. As I've just emphasized here, we should be the global leaders when it comes to the ethics of animal consumption, but we're not, okay? In fact, strangely, we're labeled as being humane when it comes to animal welfare because of our methodologies. But you're absolutely right there that these birds will be problematic even if they were upside down. So another method is required. Will we ever get to that? Allahu A'lam. Is that harm that's causing those birds, pushing for us to, do we overlook the harm caused to those birds because of the demand that we have or the way the industry is? That's, I guess, another topic. Is non-chicken meats also susceptible to possible death before slaughter when stunned, or is it just specifically due to size? It is specific to birds, yes, chickens in particular, because that's what we consume more. When it comes to cows and goats, then no, it's not as you've rightly said, because first of all, they are not water bath stunned. They are stunned individually, whereas hens are stunned, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 hens, maybe even more, end up in a water bath at the same time. Whereas an animal is stunned individually, and it's normally, there's two ways of stunning a lamb, for example. It's head and back, which will stun its brain and stun its heart, but that will bring about cardiac arrest. But where those people who don't use, who have a more, what you would call a more Islamic approach, let's use that word for now, they will remove the back stunner and they will just have the head stunner, and that will stun the animal. But because now you're looking at the animal, it will vary, and we do have a paper on that as well, that you will find on our Wifaqul Ulama website, and it's called Lamb Sheep Pre-Slaughter Stunning, and that was issued I don't know when that was issued. There's no date, strangely enough. Anyway, you can't miss it. It's Fatwa ID number 00012, and you should find it on there. And in there, we clearly explain that when it comes to lamb slaughter, even if it's stunned, then it doesn't kill the animal. Okay, so if there was such a demand, then that would be the case. Okay, stunning is becoming common, and most existing gas stunning systems are stun to kill. How these systems can be suitable for halal slaughter? Yes, stunning is becoming common, but the reason why it's becoming common because there's no resistance to it. Unfortunately, you're now starting to see even certifying bodies that are now accepting stunning, and as they are, it's pushing the market. Remember, we don't necessarily want to, if stunning is used in an appropriate way, the multiple bath stunner is a problem. But if stunning could be managed in a certain way, like we've already demonstrated with the lamb sheep one, then there is scope for it. Okay, there is scope for it. If it renders the animal unconscious, if it renders the animal to death, basically, if it kills the animal, then that's where we have our issue. So we're not sort of saying that stunning as a whole is something that should be, made illegal and removed. We know the real, we're realistic, we're pragmatic. People are there to make money. You suddenly say to them, that's it, you can't stun anymore. And also we've got to be sort of a little bit open-minded as well, that where there is, even if it means we have to, wiggle, as we call it, wiggle space, where there is wiggle space, we will use that wiggle space. Why? Because we do not know what the future brings. We do not know how legislation could change in the future. So stunning itself in the broader context can be seen as something permissible, assuming it renders the animal unconscious and not bring about its death. As we've demonstrated with the way water bath multiple bird stunning is, generally it's at least killing some, there's no doubt about that. it's harming others, and therefore it's something that we should avoid. And when it comes to gas kill, you're absolutely correct. Gas killing is done to kill, not to stun, and that's why I use the word gas kill, not gas stun. But having said that, if the desire is there, if the demand is there, if the push is there, then we can knock patients out before operations. We can do lots of things when there's research behind it as to what's the right level of content or whatever. So again, if the demand was there, if the push was there, and then obviously the money would be there because the abattoirs, the businesses themselves will put the money in. Is there a way, for example, that you could put the birds onto a van and somehow they were rendered unconscious on the van even before they arrived at the slaughterhouse? There's no need for shackling now. There's no need for this. No, this is just an if, and ensuring that no animal dies either. Work needs to be done in that area. So what is our solution other than bringing our demands down or have the birds slaughtered individually in treachery? Our solution is what we have here. I don't know where you're from, sir, but here in the UK, we have certifying bodies that ensure that hens, chickens, poultry is unstunned, and they have certification for that. So what we do in the meantime is we go to those certifying bodies that are certifying unstunned poultry, and we buy that. So that exists here in the UK. Exists. I don't know where you're from. I'm assuming you're from the UK. If you're not from the UK, then you would need to find a local certifying body, a local certifying group that will ensure that you can buy unstunned. It exists. We have legislation in Europe. Said I'm assuming you're European. We have legislation in Europe which permits Muslims not to be excluded from that law, which means we can continuously eat animals which have not been stunned. So remember, the focus is this multiple bird water bath stunner, which is problematic. Can that be developed further? Can that be tinkered with? Can something be done? This is all up to the industry. It's something for them to take a lead on. But we have the Sharia ethics. We also have the market. We should be the leaders. Unfortunately, we're not. We're still the followers, even in something which we have that level of authority. I'm from the US. Unfortunately, we don't have any such organization that I'm aware of at this point. I think there are some. What I will do is, if you tweet me or whatever the word is, or private message me through tweet, then I will try to give you the connection. I know there is a body that exists, but US is a big place, so it might be quite a way away from where you're particularly situated. But I do know of a couple of bodies that exist within the States. I guess in the States, you could probably have a farm there and raise your own animals, so it may not be that difficult for you. I don't know what legislation is in the States, but in the UK it's a little bit different. But I'm not sure how things are for you there, inshallah. So I can see the sky getting dark in front of me. You can probably see the redness of the sky coming off my face. That's not because I'm getting tired or my face is about to explode, but because the sun has set. The redness of the sky is there. Maghrib is due in the next couple of minutes. So unless there are any burning questions, then I seek permission from you to depart. What gas level, especially carbon, is a suitable to comply with alcohol? The carbon dioxide is a problem because it's considered an acidic gas, and as a result, it would cause pain to the animal. So this is something which is an issue which is being looked at, and however, the animal welfare aspect of it would mean they may not pursue carbon dioxide, but they are trying to pursue the low pressure atmosphere rather than the carbon dioxide. But it would mean something. Again, I've not done any research. This would mean somebody carrying out research on first initially in a laboratory, after a laboratory on an industrial scale, and then come up with that. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But as I said, because there's no commercial need, because there's no desire, there's no push, then we will stay where we are. And the reason why there isn't, as I said, is the ball is in our court. We are the market leaders in poultry and lamb consumption. We are the market leaders when it comes to supposedly we are with the Sharia ethics. So really we should be looking at that. But I don't think carbon dioxide is a way forward that would be pleasing for animal welfare experts because of the acidic nature of CO2. So inshallah ta'ala, on that note, we're on 1558. I bid you well. I hope it's been productive and useful, inshallah ta'ala. And when we meet again, inshallah, jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, yep, so paused on there. So I bid you farewell as well, our YouTubers, till we meet again, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.